As the voice of the third alternative, which is looking for authentic leadership in the Republic of Kenya, we come to you briefly on a night like this, partly to portray that it is a dark time in the history of Kenya, but also in view of the urgency to give a quick rejoinder to the State of the Nation address made by President William Ruto to Parliament earlier today. It is required by our Constitution in Article 132, which depicts the functions of the President of the Republic of Kenya, for the President of Kenya to A, address the opening of each newly elected parliament, and B, address a special sitting of parliament once every year and may address parliament at any other time. We note that this B section is what was done earlier today by the President. And C, once every year, Roman 1, report in an address to the nation on all the measures taken and the progress achieved in the realization of the national values referred to in Article 10, that is of our Constitution. And Roman number 2, publish in the Gazette the details of the measures and progress under subparagraph 1, that is the one I have just read. And Roman number 3, submit a report for debate to the National Assembly on the progress made in fulfilling the international obligations of the Republic. Very quickly, let us observe that indeed the President fulfilled that duty of addressing Parliament as required by the Constitution. Unfortunately, the report that he gave to Parliament, the address that was given to the nation, in our estimation, was not really a State of the Nation address in line with Article 132. It was instead a very flowing tribute of perceived achievements by his government. In fact, he dwelt a lot on the interventions that have been made economically and in terms of legal jurisprudence with regard to education and all these different things, except the most important thing, and that is a report on how far his government has made progress in realizing the values that are the blueprint of running government. Now, these values are anchored in Article 10 of our Constitution, which is titled National Values and Principles of Governance. And Article 10.1 says the national values and principles of governance in this article bind all state organs, state officers, public officers, and all persons whenever any of them A, applies or interprets this Constitution, B, enacts, applies, or interprets any law, or C, makes or implements public policy decisions. Now, the second section of this article says the national values and principles of governance include A, patriotism, national unity, sharing and devolution of power, the rule of law, democracy, and participation of the people. B includes human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, and protection of the marginalized. Now, when you get to C, Article 10 says that our national values shall include good governance, integrity, transparency, and accountability. And then D, sustainable development. President William Ruto did not address these national values as required by the Constitution. It would have been nice to see how many people he has jailed for being corrupt, for failing the C part of this, and that is good governance, integrity, transparency, and accountability. We want to know how his government has been accountable. We want to know how his government has provided good governance. We want to know how his government has promoted integrity and how he has lived himself, as well as his cabinet secretaries and officials of government, in the area of transparency and accountability. It would have been quite nice for the president to tell us how much he has achieved with regard to human dignity. When so many Kenyans are hungry, when so many Kenyans cannot access health services. Instead, what we have is plans and plans and plans. But this far, we do not have a clear report of how human dignity has been promoted. We don't have enough information on how he has promoted a government of equity, how he has promoted social justice, how he has promoted inclusiveness, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, and protection of the marginalized. Let me single out non-discrimination for just a moment. We know that President Ruto's government is dominated by two communities in this country. When you have a CS, the deputy CS or the assistant CS is from a different community, and two communities, that is the Kalenjin community and the Kikuyu community, dominate. So this is violated. When it comes to persons living with disability, we know that his government has turned a deaf ear to inclusion. When it comes to women, there was a promise that at least 50% of his cabinet would be women. Non-discrimination is the order of the day. What about the protection of the marginalized? How much development has he taken to Turkana and to Wajir and to Marsabit and to Garsen and to Isbania and other parts of this country that have been left behind by development? Isn't development still concentrated in the urban areas? And lastly, if I may just conclude this very quickly, looking at the report that he made in Parliament today, he has highlighted quite a number of areas. For example, inclusive prosperity. He says his government has achieved inclusive prosperity. I must say that despite referring to Mama Mboga and Boda Boda guys again and again in his speech, these are the people who do not even want to see President Ruto in office because he has let them down. When it comes to putting Mama Mboga first and the centering of the conversation on the people of Kenya, we know, for example, that when it comes to taxation, the people of Kenya spoke, but he completely ignored and even threatened Parliament and those who might vote against the Finance Act. We know that they were coerced. More than 90% of the Kenyans wanted a revision of the Finance Act. So I do not know how inclusive this is. I do not know how people are at the center of his government when that is happening. Judicial integrity and impartiality. He said that his government has achieved that. I wonder, when every case that is pitted against government is thrown out by the judges, the courts have become a burial ground of justice and inclusivity. In fact, when Okiya Omtata took the case about the finance bill into the courts, you remember what happened? So justice is far from being achieved. He speaks about enhanced rule of law. Now, when we go back to how the police dealt with the demonstrators that were simply coming out to exercise Article 37, you all know that we lost lives and damage of property and excessive use of force. That is far from being realized. And many Kenyans still remember the killings in the Kericho, Kisumu border, as well as the killings in Nyalenda, etc. The support of agriculture and production. He waxed very eloquent on the issue of having given fertilizer and lowered the price from 6,000 to 2,500. Now, that is very good. But these farmers who also use tractors get fertilizer with one hand, and then they face hiked fuel costs on the other. So you take with one, you give with one hand, and you take with the other. That is double speak. Now, talking about how much land has been put to agriculture, we would have wanted to hear a little bit more about Galana Kulalo projects and the irrigation that has happened in that area. And he says that he has been dealing with the minimization of living large and spending beyond our means. Yet he himself and his ministers and government officials have been trotting the globe. He himself has made more than 30 international trips in 1 year. And he continues to make many other local ones. Each of those trips, takes a lot of money. I can tell you that is not living within our means. It is living large, the exact opposite of what he says he has been doing. Bilateral development partners and, the issue of paying Kenya's debts. Now, on the one hand, we know that the bilateral developments that have happened under his watch have also led to the loss of sovereignty by the people of Kenya. So we know that Kenya has almost become America's puppet. Almost every week we are treated to decisions made in consonance with the American government, and Bill Gates and his friends are always here signing documents without our consent. That is why we now have to be treated to the whole question of GMOs, the whole question of LGBTQI rights, no matter what our people think. And even with that doublespeak, in the one hand we say we are not doing it, in the other we continue to do it. And now we have this Maisha number that is coming to us in December by force, we like it or not, and all that sponsored by the American government. Bilateral talks indeed, no. And the payment of the Eurobond, it's nice to be able to pay. Where have we got the money to pay the Eurobond? It would be nice to know, but more importantly, we want to know who took the Eurobond money and what did they do with it? Because we are paying for money that disappeared into the pockets of people. That is rather idiotic, because we cannot be paying for what we did not spend. And if Eurobond was useful for the people of Kenya, then show us exactly what it did. Which projects did it go to? And there was more than one Eurobond. We haven't even gone to the other scandals that this government has not taken time to look at. One, because they don't value the question of national values. And two, Chapter 6 of our Constitution, which is on integrity and accountability in leadership, means nothing to them. Now, he talked about the education system improving tremendously. And I looked at what is being spent on education and realized that this year alone, the budget is projected at more than 621 billion. 621 billion going to education. And that still leaving students with paying or applying for help and other reliefs. You know, it made me look very closely at education. And I was asking myself, if my team and I were to provide free education for the people of Kenya, how much money would that cost? Without factoring in TSC and the Ministry of Education spending, which needs to be investigated in and of itself, I looked at the primary school enrollment in 2021. There were 10.3 million primary pupils that were in school. But in 2023, we have 10.5 million. Now, if you took the unit cost of 15,000 shillings per pupil and you gave it to 10.5 million, you will actually end up paying 157.5 billion to give free primary education to the children of Kenya. When you come to secondary school education, I looked at it, and in 2021, the enrollment was at 3.692 million students in high school. In 2023, we have 3.8 million students in high school. If you computed and gave at the unit price of 30,000 per student, and we are using a fairly good rate, then you would only need 114 billion to give free secondary education to the students of Kenya. So the total of primary school and high school education, in order to give it free, would be 271.5 billion. Now, this includes the cost of teaching and learning materials. It includes running, co-curricular programs and activities, and it also includes academic trips that you give to students, and also includes the payment of teachers. Now, if we were to give free education all the way to undergraduate, that is university, at the rate of 210,000 shillings per student per year. If we were looking at just the number of students that we have now, that is 563,000 students. If you paid 210,000 for each of them, all you would need is 118 billion to be able to provide free university education for undergrads. So the total for primary, secondary, and undergraduate, if you were to provide it all for free, would be 389.5 billion. It's under 400 billion to provide free education to the children of Kenya, which is our obligation. Instead, we are spending 621 billion without providing that free education. So what would free education do to the children of Kenya? It would free parents from selling shambas. It would free parents from selling cows and borders in order to provide for their children for just 1 or 2 years. It would actually free them, and therefore the parents would be able to invest in the economy and pay taxes as much as they can. So we are sitting here taking Kenyans for a ride. I believe that time has come for us to do government differently. And it begins by how we appoint people in government. They must, be appointed in line with Chapter 6 of our Constitution on integrity. But more importantly, that the president should appoint in line with Article 10, people that are of values, people of character, people that can be entrusted with this country. And it also means that if anyone is adversely mentioned, that instead of transferring them from one ministry to another, you sack them. In other countries, they retire. They actually sign out themselves. Here, we just transfer them to another ministry, so they take the mess there. And lastly, I will say we have not forgotten how President Ruto appointed people that were close to him, and some of them were adversely mentioned, and the DPP, one case after another, just dropped these cases. That is a violation of our Constitution in Article 10, but it is also a violation of Chapter 6 of our Constitution. So the president fulfilled the mandate to address the nation by going to Parliament. Unfortunately, he did not do the most important thing, and that is address the progress and achievements that have been made in line with Article 10 of our Constitution. And you can be sure that was not the priority because it's not being done. And so I'm hoping that if any of his friends or those in government are listening to this, that perhaps this is one place we need to begin as we go into the next year. That we look at what we can do to arrest those who are pillaging our economy, to arrest those who have stolen money and are making us to pay, to arrest those who have pushed us into debt, and now we are living with a lot of pressure and the cost of living going so high because a few people have abused office. With those many remarks, I say God bless you and God bless Kenya.